I am so conservative,
Rationalized in my head. These are things I read in
and
the
I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had
I
invited.
remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah.
I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. Welcome to the Unknown Webcast. Today is August 31, 2021, and this is broadcast number 255. For those who believe words are more injurious than sticks and stones, and there are some who believe that, apparently, this is a bit of a trigger warning. I really am so conservative, I can't turn left even when I'm driving. In addition to giving a trigger warnings to our viewers, Ron Hensel and I both drink coffee for your protection. Today, friend and regular contributor Bob Gray from Witnesses Now for Jesus joins us on the topic of Once Upon a Time in the Watchtower. My name is Don Vino, and I'm president of the Midwest Christian Outreach in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast, and our senior researcher is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast, and here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where what happened here? Oh, I know. The palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. We're kind of overcast, though, right now. That hurricane just went by.
And you're overthinking it besides. That's
overthinking it, or not thinking enough. I don't know. Our sponsor for this edition of the Unknown Webcast is World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet. Our guest on today's webcast, if I could get that up, yes, Bob Gray. Dr. Bob has no connection whatsoever to any of the satirical content of the Unknown Webcast, hereafter known as the webcast, although we probably will not mention it again. This satirical content includes any and all commercials, end credits, puns, smart remarks, or anything else that might fall under the definition of satire. In the meantime, Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. bears no liability for or responsibility for anyone's opinions regarding this satirical content.
In other words, we don't care what they think.
Yeah, pretty much. Our regular announcements. Notice the opinions expressed on this webcast are ours and should be yours too. If you enjoy it or if you hate it and you want to inflict it on someone else, go to MidwestOutreach.org, click the yellow donate button, and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite video channels, whatever they might be. So, every time I see Bob, he looks a little bit older.
He starts looking more and more like Russell each time we see him.
Charles Taze? Oh, wow, you got a point there. Except I think Russell was a little bald, wasn't he?
Yeah. Bald. He was, yeah. Brigham Young, too. I think they had similar beard styles.
It's a very 19th century look.
Very much so, yeah. So, Once Upon a Time in the Watchtower is, I think, an appropriate title for talking about this kind of stuff, because the Watchtower is sort of a fairy tale organization, in my opinion. It's a theological fairy tale, but they tell a lot of stories. They just don't happen to be all true. Now, having said that, I have in my background today my future home in the new system of things.
The new system of things, yes.
Yes, the Watchtower terminology for what happens after Armageddon is over, and they get to wander around the neighborhoods and pick the home that they will reside in through the Millennial Kingdom.
But, in those illustrations, I only ever see outdoors. They always have they look like they're somewhere in some paradise in Hawaii. or something, you know. Although there are mountains and stuff which kind of remind me of Switzerland, but there always seem to it's never winter in the New World Order or in the new system of things. So yeah,
Well, that kind of works because it's never winter because there's never Christmas. So you don't
yeah.
really need winter, right?
Well, you'll notice another thing too is that nobody's wearing shorts.
Huh. Yeah. The styles are going to be very,
Very
even though,
Midwest, 19.
but they do show people from all these different cultures and
Yes.
countries who wear stereotypical outfits that they probably don't really wear today. If you go to those countries, they're probably wearing, typical Western style clothing.
Well,
So-
and there's something else that's missing that Bob and I were discussing just prior to going live, and that is what, Bob?
God, the presence of God.
The presence of God.
The illustrations deal mostly with physical things. A lot of the witness discussion around it deals with physicality. Plenty to eat, nobody's sick, you get to pet lions and panda bears and have an elephant as a pet and all of that type of thing.
Well, who cleans up after these elephants? That's what I want to know.
They won't leave a mess in the new system.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Another part of the fairy tale is, and they all lived happily ever after.
And they all lived happily ever after, right? Except, let me think about this. Do they live happily ever after? Don't they have to clean up the mess right after Armageddon? If Wilbur Lingle, mutual friend, had done a little book on, kind of interesting questions to ask Jehovah's Witnesses, like, who's going to make the diesel fuel? Who's going to clean up all of the bodies after the Battle of Armageddon? And their first response usually is, well, the birds are going to eat them. Well, okay, but there's only so many birds that are carnivorous. There's, I don't know how many millions, trillions of people on the planet today, and you've got 5 million Jehovah's Witnesses that'll be around still. And they'll go, well, okay, we'll use heavy equipment. Oh, okay. Well, who's going to manufacture the diesel fuel for the heavy equipment?
I've never seen birds eat bones either. So,
No,
yeah.
Well,
So-
they actually kind of went in a couple different directions during the years I was a witness. For the early part, we were going to clean up and all of this. And then later on, they seemed to talk more about that Jehovah would miraculously dispose of these bodies. Kind of like he did with Jesus, turns them into gases,
Just turn them
Gases.
into, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's the way. Just turn it into perpetual gas.
What is it about this Jesus being, a spirit body thing? I mean, was he just faking it in the resurrection appearances when he said, he was just faking it? So this is supposed to be the proof that he was resurrected and it was fake.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when he said, touch me, I'm not a spirit because a spirit doesn't have bones.
Right.
Basically misleading his own disciples in order to illustrate the reality of his resurrection. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In a very distorted kind. It makes sense if you are so bent on denying what the text says.
Yes.
Right.
That anything will do. The most bizarre interpretation. So why didn't the disciples say, but no, that's okay, Jesus. I know that you're not even really here in a physical form. You're just gases now, or your body is just gases, and you're just a spirit.
But it may be worse actually, Ron, and perhaps Bob can correct me if I'm misstating this in some way. But in truth, Jesus wasn't even resurrected. A being was recreated, and it wasn't Jesus. It was Michael the Archangel.
Yeah.
Right?
So
it gets really weird because they do that whole, the soul is the combination of the body and the breath of life. And they view that even for spirit creatures. So when you think about the whole thing of Jesus being Michael or Michael being Jehovah's first creation.
Right.
And then they say when Jesus was conceived, Jehovah transferred the life force of Michael to the womb of Jesus.
Now, it's the electricity that was, moves him.
Right.
Pieces
In
into
effect,
one.
what Jehovah did then was kill Michael.
Right.
So,
But he had downloaded a copy of his life pattern.
yeah, but Jehovah killed his own firstborn so he
Right.
could be born on earth as a man so he could be killed again.
Right.
And then resurrected as Michael, who got killed in the first place.
Right.
Yeah,
but
wouldn't it be-
there's no actual connection between them except their electricity.
Wouldn't it be easier to just affirm the doctrine of eternal torment for the wicked? I just feel like I'm being tormented just by listening to this explanation.
You are. But see, that is the problem with really serious heresy like this, is once you invent one lie, then someone catches you on it, you have to invent a second lie to mitigate the problems of the first lie. But then now you have an additional problem because more problems come up from the first two lies. You have to add another lie. So you have this continual storytelling theology. Once upon a time in the Watchtower, where we will tell you new and interesting stories, none of which are based on actual Bible teaching. So
Yeah.
let's start in the beginning, though. Once upon a time on the Watchtower, are there any benefits, or was there anything you received that is beneficial today as a result of being a Jehovah's Witness? What's some of the good things that might have happened, if there are any?
Oh, there are actually a number. To be truthful, most of my years as a witness, I loved it. First, probably, well, not most importantly, but very importantly, becoming a Jehovah's Witness got me off drugs.
Oh, that's positive.
That is that it was probably the drugs I was taking that impaired my judgment that allowed me to
get you into the Watchtower
in the first place. And once I became a Jehovah's Witness, they got me off drugs.
So just how high were you?
I woke up.
Just how high were you at your baptism into the Watchtower Society?
Oh, I was off at that point. But,
Oh, you were off. So how high were you when you first started?
oh, I don't remember.
Do you remember?
If you remember the 60s, you weren't there.
Yeah, right.
If
you remember Woodstock, you weren't there.
Yeah.
The process of being converted.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you remember wondering why you were doing it? Like, were you so impaired that you just were like, okay, whatever you guys say, or how did that work?
So a friend of mine that I worked with was talking. He was Jehovah's Witness. He was talking to everybody on the crew except for me.
Because you were stoned?
Crazy look in my eye, the long hair.
Yeah, okay.
I might put him off a little bit. I don't know.
You never know.
But, and because I grew up in a congregational church, I knew all the Bible stories. I actually thought of becoming a pastor at one point.
Ooh.
And then I got into drugs. And so that kind of impaired that a bit. But I remember I made up some lame question about the Apocrypha or something like that. And he gave me the little blue truth book. I took it home. I read the whole book that night. And I just thought I had found the ultimate truth.
Really?
And he showed up the next day at work. He says, did you take a look at that book at all? I said, yeah, I read the whole thing, man. It's awesome. And so I says, why don't you come on over? We'll have dinner. And, I was all set to get baptized like right away. I started going to meetings right away. I mean, it's really scary how quickly I fell into this thing. And, you figure I had been in the Coast Guard for 4 years. Let me see. I started studying in August of 73. I got out of the Coast Guard just in April.
What makes it scary looking back on it?
The fact that an alleged adult, I was not quite 23 at the time, could be taken in that quickly. And someone who kind of knew his Bible, sort of. I look back on it now and it's just, it's embarrassing to, on one level, just how quickly I just went right into it.
So you got off of drugs and lest any Jehovah's Witness say your conversion was questionable because you were on drugs. You eventually did get thoroughly indoctrinated.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and from a rational point of view, I mean, you weren't, you know.
Yeah, we asked a lot of questions. Back then, it was a 6-month Bible study program. So you studied the truth book for 6 months. And at that point, you either got baptized or not, because 75 was right around the corner.
Right.
We actually spent 9 months going through the truth book. And we had Jimmy over 2 or 3 nights a week, and we'd go 2, 3, 4 hours sometimes.
Now, I have memories.
Questions, but I don't think we, first of all, didn't ask the right questions.
Right.
And we accepted all the answers far too quickly.
Well, you know, some people are like that. Were you the questioning type? Would you normally not have done that?
No, I would not have normally.
Okay.
My time in the Coast Guard, I was in kind of a weird spiritual place. I had no love at all for the churches. Chaplains, I had special contempt for them. This was the Vietnam War was still going on, and the chaplains were under the guise of religion sending innocent boys off to die.
Oh, so that sounds like how they got you, pacifism.
Well, that was one of the buttons they pushed.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so the anti-war spirit that you had,
Anti-government,
anti-government.
anti-church.
Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, and what kind of religious background? Now you may have asked that, Ron. But
Congregationalist.
Yes.
Congregationalist. Okay.
Was that liberal Congregationalist?
No, they hadn't invented that yet.
Really?
No, it was.
I think it was up there in the Northeast.
Yeah. It was a mainstream church. I actually more of my spiritual backing probably came from going to an Advent Christian church camp in my early teens, and that's what kind of set me on the path of thinking about becoming a pastor at some point. And so when I became a Jehovah's Witness and got into the ministry, as they call it, I thought that had been a fulfillment of my earlier proclivities in that direction.
Well, and they're theologically somewhat close.
Yeah.
Closely. Well,
yeah.
I remember what was going on in the Watchtower Society beginning only because I had Jehovah's Witnesses friends in school beginning in '73 that I recall, and they were talking about Armageddon. Mm-hmm. And I remember even the one particular student I knew in junior high was pretty aggressive in his witnessing, on campus. But especially the adults that went door to door were not just aggressive; they were like belligerent.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes into 74, 75. And even, especially in 75, I mean, it was almost like they were ready to start a fight sometimes. I might be slightly exaggerating, but they were, let's put it this way, their rhetoric was rather bellicose. They were, they would say things like, we're the only religion that practices what it teaches. And they would say this very openly and loudly, some of the people I ran into. Lately it's quite a bit more soft pedaled, if you ask me. It's quite more...
Depends on who you talk to and where you talk to them. I still get that we're the only religion that practices.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of the tone of voice. My
yeah.
cat just walked in. I'm going to have to kick him out. Hold on. Okay, I'll let you guys go.
Okay, so the only true, that's kind of interesting because there was a period here a few years back where I was sitting down with Jehovah's Witness and sort of asked them about their religious, how they got in. And they said, well, I was really interested in religion and I started researching all the religions and came to the realization that the Watchtower was the one true religion really representing God in ways that I wasn't finding anywhere else. So I thought, well, that's interesting, and didn't follow up on that. We talked about some of the things. Well, then a few weeks later, I was talking with another Jehovah's Witness, and I asked him how he got in, and he said, guess what? I was researching all other religions, and I went, I've heard this before. So I said, okay, perhaps you can help me understand, because I've heard this recently. How you did your research? What was it that you used to go about that? I mean, for example, what was it about the Urantia book that caused you to doubt? And he went, "What's that?" I said, "Okay, so you didn't really research all the religions, but maybe the kind of the more popular ones. So, what was it about Hinduism exactly that caused you to not recognize?" He said, "I didn't really read anything on Hinduism." I said, "Okay, that's a pretty big one to miss." Where did you do your research? What did you read? Well, I read the Watchtower. I said, "Oh, do you think it could have been biased?"
So yeah, so
we have a lot of action going on here. There you go.
This is where they did that research.
Mankind's search for God.
Yep. Yeah.
It actually I haven't looked at this in a while, but it's got chapters on Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Shinto, Judaism, Christianity, apostasy. Ooh.
I didn't know that was a religion.
The Reformation, modern disbelief, a return to the true God. So at the end, they wrap up. And so, yeah, a lot of them, this was their research.
I see. So
now, I do want to mention one thing, Ron, before you go and ask your next so what question. And that is, there is a conference coming up here in a few weeks that we want to let people know they should consider going to. It is called the Witnesses Now for Jesus East Coast Conference. And that is, where is that at, Bob?
It is at Devonshire Church, 5630 Devonshire Road, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 17112.
And if they want more information, they can go to WNFJ.org.
Yes.
WitnessesNowForJesus.org.
Yep. And there it'll give you all the information about where it is, and lodging and dining options.
Okay, good.
Mission Barbecue there is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Mission Barbecue. We have a Mission. I discovered a Mission Barbecue not too far from us here.
Oh.
We had them cater my son's wedding rehearsal dinner. So
there's a big promo for Mission Barbecue. That should get us at least a free lunch, right?
Right. I think so.
It'd be good barbecue.
Okay, so you had some good memories of being in there. What are the kinds of things were helpful now that you have left the society?
Well, one is public speaking. The Theocratic Ministry School, as nerve-wracking as it was, really did put me in a good position to speak before people. I was the kid that whenever there was an oral report to be done, I just dreaded that with my whole soul. It was the worst. And I was surprised how relatively quickly I slipped into being able to speak halfway decently before a crowd. That was good. As incorrect as they are on a lot of their theology, I mean, I did learn how to find all the books of the Bible and, look stuff up and that sort of thing. I think the overall moral views that they have are good. The odd thing is that when I came in the early 70s, there was a whole bunch of us that was right around my age at that point. We were in our early to mid 20s, and with few exceptions, most of them are divorced now.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, Shay and I are one of the few couples that we, most of the couples we hung out with back then are divorced. And that was way back then, back in the 70s, early 80s, that type of thing.
They divorced by then?
Yeah. Yep.
Huh. Well, did you see any common threads there, or was it just?
I think a lot of it was the marry in haste, repent at leisure syndrome. The common recommendation for raging hormones was to get married as quickly as possible, make it legal. You were all set. And as long as he or she was a spiritual person, as far as the witnesses were concerned, there were just some horrendous matches of people that, I look back now and go, what? They had no business getting married.
Huh.
And some of them are still dealing with the after effects of that. I've got a friend of mine, he and this woman got married, and it was just, when I heard they were an item, I was just like, really? And nothing in common other than the fact that they were witnesses, but for a Jehovah's Witness, that's the most important thing.
It's interesting you bring up the issue of divorce, because that was pretty, probably a consequence of the sexual revolution. It was pretty culturally promoted, divorce. If you don't really like your relationship, just get divorced. I remember Joy and I got married in 1970. Most of our friends got married around that time, 71, 72 or so. And by around 1978 or 9, many of them were getting divorced.
Yeah.
And sometimes Joy and I would look at that and we go, they're getting divorced. I don't understand it. We really have reason to get divorced, and they're not. But we were staying together. Yeah. And a movie came out. It's kind of a B movie. It's not. It was sort of interesting, but we identified with it. Called The Last Married Couple in North America, 1980, with George Segal and Natalie Wood. And kind of showing this dilemma of this couple that were generally happily married. Everyone that they know is in the process of divorce, and they're going, why are we staying married? What is the deal here? And Natalie Wood goes on a rant at one point, and she goes, the only thing that is permanent is this pimple. It kind of felt like that, So,
well, this kind of ties into just the whole question of how much does the culture influence the Watchtower Society, or the Jehovah's Witnesses in the Watchtower Society? Have they seen the same kind of, like right now, people have said that the divorce rate among evangelicals is about the same as that of the general culture, maybe higher. Is that true in the Watchtower Society?
Yeah, I doubt that they keep records. If they did, they would never publish that. But the thing I found, especially when I became an elder, was that because their view of, you could get divorced, but you couldn't remarry unless adultery had taken place. And so I found a lot of couples that were having marital difficulties. It came down to each of them was waiting for the other one to commit adultery so they could do it legally. And it was a race to see, who gave in first.
What about if one is a Jehovah's Witness and the other one is not? Is there pressure from the society in those marriages to get divorced?
Sometimes individually, the society, said, stay with your marriage mate unless, the unbelieving mate leaves. And which is scripturally
biblical, right?
How about if the unbelieving mate wants you to leave the Watchtower Society?
Well, then you don't do that.
You don't do that, but what if, do they ever, if the elders or leaders are concerned that you might they counsel you to divorce?
They're told not to.
Okay.
Yeah, there have been elders that have done that, and I've heard people online saying that elders told them to do that. But the direction from the society to the elders was not to encourage divorce ever. In fact, a lot of times there were women staying with very abusive husbands. And the counsel from elders was, to stay with him unless he leaves. Later on, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, they came up with criteria under which you could get separated. And one of them was absolute endangerment to your spirituality.
But not to your physical life.
No.
Oh.
Your spirituality, though.
Yeah, and
you might doubt the Watchtower, so that would be endangering your spirituality.
I was at an elders' school at one point, and I was sitting with a bunch of other elders from another congregation, and they were saying how they had to write the society because a woman came to them and wanted to separate from her husband under those grounds that her endangerment to her
spirituality
was because her husband was a smoker. They weren't.
Well, Nicole Lunt says that if you are considered apostate, they are not discouraged from ending the marriage.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
That could be a danger to your spirituality if your spouse is an apostate.
Is an apostate, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of kind of the once upon a time in the Watchtower themes, in the 1980s, in 1988, a pastor, not a Jehovah's Witness, but a pastor in Florida did a little tract, 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Returning in 88.
Oh, yeah.
And I and several others had a lot of phone calls from people going, is he coming? I'm going to start going to church. And they would flock back to the churches. And I said, if that's where you're going, don't bother because they're probably wrong. Yeah. And obviously he was wrong. So in 1989, he redid it and found that yet another reason why 89 reasons why Jesus will return in 1989.
Salem Kurban. Remember that guy?
Yeah, exactly. So, but he's not the only one who's ever done that sort of thing. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society has done that on more than one occasion, and one of our sponsors has a little product to help people even recall those days.
Oh yeah, they're wonderful days too. So our friends at World's End Theology Outlet have a question, and that is, why settle for timeless substance when you can have outdated style? Lately, have you found yourself fondly reminiscing about years ago when the Jehovah's Witnesses who came to your door would relieve you of the fear of hell, only to turn around and threaten you with Armageddon? And if you are a Jehovah's Witness, do you miss the day when God's organization would let you get your fire and brimstone on by harassing your neighbors with threats that their complete destruction was right around the corner? Well, now you can relive those glorious days with Watchtower Society Armageddon calendars. Recall the relief you felt when once again God's organization completely dropped the prophetic ball. Complete satisfaction is guaranteed. Every calendar from every year that the Watchtower Society predicted Armageddon would come, you will be completely satisfied, which is more than we can say for the original predictions. Get the Watchtower Society Armageddon calendars at a special discount clearance price at World's End Theology Outlet. And you just don't want to miss them. You can hang them on the wall. You can use them as
placemats or on your dinner table.
There's 101 uses for these things.
All right, Bob.
Avoided the term fire sale, so
yeah.
Exactly, the fire sale. All right, so you had some pretty good experiences, some reasonable experiences at least. What was your best experience from the Watchtower? You said leaving.
Yeah, that's what you said earlier.
Leaving, yeah. Well, that kind of narrows it down a bit. Not so much an experience, but just an overall, the feeling that you were ultimately right when most of the rest of the world was wrong. And also kind of an exclusivity thing there, that you were the only ones that were right.
Uh-huh.
I often talk about Jehovah's Witnesses as being individually humble and collectively arrogant. And I think that's really what the case is. I knew a lot of great Jehovah's Witness people. I miss them to this day.
Yeah. And
it's it saddens me greatly, because a number of my contemporaries have passed away. Those pre-COVID that I would see out, I would frequent the Panera Bread place that they would take coffee break, because I knew they were concerned about me, so I'd show up just so they could see I was okay.
Oh yeah, very nice of you.
I would see them and they just looked so old and tired, and I just see them, trying to work for their salvation.
Right.
What was it? Somebody made the comment about them, dragging their sins from door to door, hoping some of them would fall off during the journey.
Wow, dragging their sins from door to door. That is an interesting
How,
comment.
how conscious do you think they are of their sins? Now, particularly, I'm thinking of not the sins that the Watchtower Society wants them to think about, which would be they're not trying hard enough, they're not doing enough, they're not motivated enough. I'm talking about the real sins, the sins of the heart against God and against their neighbors. Do you think there's an awareness? Do you think, they do spend time in the Bible?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they're very aware of that. And as an elder, I had people come to me and the other elders confessing all, because they have, it's not formal confession like in the Catholic Church.
Right.
But for Jehovah's Witness, if you've done something sexually inappropriate, for the witness, that isn't totally taken care of by you just going to God and asking for forgiveness and, that type of thing. You have to go to the elders and the matter has to be handled. And if you don't do that, that's always there. And they don't talk about it much, but they have the Achan syndrome. Remember Achan, who stole destroy everything, and Achan kept some gold and silver and garments and all of this. And because of that, God withdrew his support for their next battle, and they get their behinds kicked. Well, witnesses do that same thing. A lot of times, if a congregation isn't doing well, say the hours aren't up, people, there's just a bad spirit about it, they go, oh, maybe there's an Achan amongst us.
Wow.
Maybe there's some unconfessed, undealt with sin that needs to be dealt with. And so, I was frankly shocked when I became an elder at the amount of sexual immorality that was going on in the congregation. As a ministerial servant, as a rank and file guy, I had no clue. And
are we talking about something beyond just something you might do individually in the privacy of your own home?
Yeah, definitely.
And
involvements between people that you never dreamt would be involved.
We're talking about, how about between members?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so adulterous relationships happened.
Yeah. And then, things like smoking. Smoking was a big thing. When I went in 73, it was right when they gave everyone 6 months to quit smoking or you'd get disfellowshipped. And if somebody would confess, oh, I smoked a cigarette, and it was a big thing. But if that wasn't dealt with, that would be kind of weighing on that person if they were, really a devout witness.
So is this still happening? Really, this is what we call a cult of confession. I don't usually think of the Watchtower Society that way, but it sounds like maybe it's a low-level form of it.
I don't know now. The organization of Jehovah's Witnesses is morphed into something I barely recognize.
Right.
Really?
I think I mentioned it before. I'm in touch on a Discord server with a group of about 80 former elders and a few that are PIMOs, physically and mentally out, still actually technically serving as elders and crafting their exit at this point. And
what do they say?
I hear about it, just like, okay, this is not your grandfather's Watchtower anymore.
What are some of the key differences?
Well, it's interesting you should raise that before you answer that, because one of the things that Joy and I have tried to communicate as we are speaking in churches is learn what you can about what the Watchtower officially teaches, but be aware that the Jehovah's Witness you're talking to today may not believe some things that the Watchtower taught even a year ago.
Right.
You can tell when someone joined based on what they currently believe. We had a situation some years ago where Joy was talking to several Jehovah's Witnesses that were friends, and she pointed out that it was at a time you could not take organ transplants And one of them said, "Well, we still can't," and the other one said, "Oh no, we had new light on that." So you can kind of tell when they join based on what they believe currently.
Yeah, and even from country to country, one of the things that in the U.S., if a man's an elder or a ministerial servant, and he supports his child going to college,
right,
his qualifications to serve are called into question because higher education is very much discouraged. Now, I have witness friends in Nigeria tell me that going to college there is the norm rather than the exception. Beards is another thing. In the U.S., beards, they're becoming more acceptable. Definitely not one like this, by the way, but a close trimmed beard. In some countries, they're expected. Others, they're totally frowned upon. Yeah, it's an interesting.
I remember a time when if you met a Jehovah's Witness who had been to college, they had graduated before they entered the Watchtower Society.
Right.
Yeah. So I also remember the first time I ever saw a Jehovah's Witness mailman, because the U.S. Postal Service had just become a partially privatized organization. This is what the way it was explained to me was, oh yeah, it used to be against the society's rules, but now that it's not called the U.S. Post Office, but the U.S. Postal Service, they passed a law, they changed how it relates to the government. Now it was considered okay.
Yeah,
that's what they said.
The one that kind of brought me up short was when this guy who was an elder just up in Portland, Maine, just 45 minutes from me. I knew him when he was a kid, and I knew his dad real well. But he talked about the hockey league. And I went, what? He said, yeah, we have a hockey league. And, for all the time I was a witness, competitive sports were very much frowned on. And this is actually a hockey league amongst Jehovah's Witnesses with congregations having teams, and they have tournaments and trophies. And I'm just like, what?
So they can become more familiar with passing the puck.
Can they check each other and get into fist fights? Well, what are the biggest changes? I mean, these are all interesting kind of cultural changes, but is there anything that's really that over the last 40 or 50 years that really stands out?
Doctrinally, not so much.
Okay.
They waffle back and forth on a number of things that are fairly minor. Will the people of Sodom and Gomorrah be resurrected or not?
Right.
We've been back and forth on that seven or eight times now.
Right. Which is interesting when you have like a book study and you have several people with the book from different publication dates, and they have different answers in those books.
Yes.
Makes for
I've got somewhere in my archives a list of, I think, 72 changes they made to the Revelation book.
Right.
Some were fairly major, some weren't. But doctrinally, no. I think more of it is just, well, the thing now is that all the kingdom halls are still closed.
Right.
Some people are saying they're being sold off in droves. I don't see anything that indicates that. I know they have sold some. Some of these former elders I'm in touch with have theorized they're going to sell off all the kingdom halls and go strictly online. That could be. I mean, that's several $1 billion worth of real estate that the organization owns. When I was in, each congregation had their own corporation, and they held title to their kingdom hall. Somewhere along the way, the society, whatever corporation, Watchtower related corporation, took over ownership of all the kingdom halls, at least in the United States. Probably the worst speculation on that is that basically they'll go strictly online. They are evidently losing some members. I can foresee the possibility of them wanting to shed all of their dead wood and keeping just their most committed people and kind of going underground before any real persecution hits. And they do this online. But I see the question: are Jehovah's Witnesses allowed to hunt game? Yeah, I live in Maine, which is, it's pretty common here. Back in the 70s, into the early 80s, we had a circuit overseer that when he came to visit, we'd go shooting with him. We'd get on the range and, fire off a bunch of rounds. And then gun ownership became a thing. And then they instituted the thing where if you had a job that required you to carry a gun, you were no longer exemplary. So you couldn't be an elder, a ministerial servant, or a regular pioneer. If you were a policeman, a prison guard, security guard that carried a gun, that sort of thing.
Now, is that because of carrying a gun or because it's government employment?
More of carrying a gun and possibly being in a position where you would have to shoot somebody. And you would be blood guilty. Well, if you were shooting somebody in defense of someone else, there's a whole bunch of argument that could be made about that.
Yeah.
But last I knew, the general view was that hunting game was fine as long as you ate it. That you weren't just out killing stuff just for the fun of it.
So how many Jehovah's Witnesses? I know you haven't done surveys or polls, so this is strictly a guess, but on average, how many Jehovah's Witnesses do you suppose realize that the Bible was only written to the anointed class?
Because the way they word all of that, and that whole anointed, non-anointed, they always soft pedal the differences between the two. They'll say, well, the other sheep are not parties to the new covenant, but they benefit from it.
Right. But how do they benefit from it?
Well, because they get to live forever in a house like in your background.
Well, because they're associated with the anointed class to whom the Bible is written, right?
That too, yeah. In fact, they've used the phrase several times, not so much recently, but they say that during the 1,000 years, the anointed apply the benefits of Christ's sacrifice to the other sheep. I don't know if it's like, rubbing oil on them or what, but this application of the benefits is interesting. And the same thing with a lot of the verses in the Bible that they see as only applying to the anointed. I've noticed over the years they've more and more soft pedaled that one too. For instance, one of the things that just absolutely undid me when I came out of the Witnesses and read John 15, and it says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. As a non-anointed witness, I was not a branch. And they were very plain about that. In fact, I've got a quote on my webpage. They say that even though they're not branches, you still have to bear fruit. And I remember thinking, even when I was a witness, how do I bear fruit if I'm not a branch? That just doesn't work.
Right.
But after I left the Witnesses and read that and just went, I'm a branch now. And it just absolutely undid me. And then, I'd read more. Revelation 8:16, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we're children of God. As a non-anointed witness, I was not a child of God yet. And I read that now and like, yes, his spirit bears witness with my spirit that I'm his child now.
Well, but as a non-anointed, you would never be a child of God because your salvation depends solely on how you treat the anointed.
Well, that too, yeah. They're very, very plain about that. And I wrote an article, and I've brought it up in talks at conferences before, the whole idea of being adopted by God. And for the non-anointed, they are not adopted until they come through Armageddon or are resurrected into the millennium, go through the whole millennium. They're good. They don't do anything that God will zap up for. And then at the end, when Satan is let out of the abyss, for them, it's the final test. And only after that they pass that final test are they really adopted as a child of God? And I wrote an article about our adoption. I said, imagine that here you are, an orphan,
Yeah.
and someone says, "Oh, I'll adopt you," and they even use the phrase in the Watchtower. It's as if Jehovah has filled out your adoption papers, and once you make it through the tribulation, you make it through the millennium, and you pass that final test, that's when he will be pleased to sign off.
Oh.
And imagine that in real life, if you're an orphan and someone offers to adopt you and says, "Oh, but wait a minute, we got a few things we need to deal with. I've heard you've got some behavioral problems we need to deal with, and I'll take care of all of the legal stuff for you. You won't be punished and all this, but you need to be good for a while."
It's almost as
And
it's almost like they're deliberately constructing doctrine
Yeah.
in such a way as to keep people in line to do what they want to do.
Absolutely.
Every doctrinal decision is made with the object of controlling people in mind.
I remember, so I had grown a much shorter beard as I was in the process of leaving. And we were in the elders meeting when I was stepping down from being an elder. And then we went on to the rest of the meeting where the circuit overseer tried to make a case for having me removed, and on the basis of my beard. And it was like, you can't fire me, I just quit. I didn't say that, but and one of the arguments was, well, Brother Gray, if we let you grow a beard, we know you'll keep it nice and trim, but some of the other brothers that aren't as spiritually mature may grow these things that look like this. But I remember sitting there thinking, if you let me grow a beard, God's done that. I just stopped interfering with what is natural. And but yeah,
I'm going to ask Ron if he has quick access to. If you don't, that's okay. But maybe quick access to the hair oil.
I can get it in a minute if you have
benefits. Greasing. Yeah, I will.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're talking about hairstyles and facial hair and those kinds of things, the Watchtower has a product that kind of can address that. Just for those who are
it's the classic New World Translation hair oil. It's also a World's End Theology outlet product. So our friends at World's End Theology outlet, they want to call to our attention what's going on. You know what the problem is, obviously. The problem is that men's hairstyles have gone downhill at your Kingdom Hall. The reason, of course, is misunderstandings arising from the New World Translation revision. The solution is to grease your head with classic New World Translation hair oil. Once again, you can say, "With oil you have greased my head." Psalm 23:5b from the New World Translation of 1984. Yes, classic New World Translation hair oil based on the old light of the original New World Translation. The one that the Apostle Paul used at World's End Theology Outlet. So, yeah, that's it's a big problem. The hairstyles have gone downhill, I've noticed. And
okay,
if they would just get back to the former version of the New World Translation,
then that would solve all of that.
Just take care of the whole problem.
So the control thing is interesting. What fascinated me was once they went to all Zoom meetings, they were basically directed to dress up like they were going to a real meeting.
Really? So
they would go and they would have their camera on. And I attended this elder from Portland. His dad passed away a little over a year ago, and I went to the Zoom funeral under an assumed name and with my camera off, and because 25 years later they still remember me as that elder that went apostate.
You're a memorable guy.
But yeah, scary enough. Yeah. But I watched. I was able to go through the Zoom, all the thumbnails of all the people that I knew 25 years ago. And they were all dressed up. You'd see this family sitting on the couch. They were posing for a family photograph.
Yeah, right.
At the meetings, they have them stand and sing like they would at a normal meeting.
And that's when you want to make sure you're wearing pants. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
Probably, yeah. I was wondering about that.
But I asked the elders online, I says, is that common? They said, oh, yeah. So everyone's there to show off. I mean, like your background, Dawn, is perfect for that. They'd be on that couch all dressed up, the men in their jackets and ties, and the women in their dresses, and all perfectly arranged.
you want
about appearance.
You want to scan an illustration of the new what is it, the new world order? What do they call it?
The new order.
The new order of things, and put that in your background. That would be the ultimate, wouldn't it?
But I'm hearing a lot lately them just going into the meetings with their cameras off.
We're talking generally today about a number of different things. Nothing specific, but what do they teach on salvation? What do they teach on Armageddon? Why do they go door to door? Those kinds of. And the reason we're doing that is partly to let people know about the conferences coming up. We're going to talk about this week, next week, and the following week. The Witnesses Now for Jesus convention in Devonshire Church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, September 24 and 25 of 2021. Boy, that's a lot of twos in there. You can get more information at wnfj.org. This is, for Joy and I especially, kind of a highlight of our year. We got involved in ministry because of Jehovah's Witnesses. We went to our first convention in 1990. And several things happened. We walked through the door and started meeting former Jehovah's Witnesses who are now believers and excited about the faith. Denominations just kind of drop at the door when you walk in. They're interested in the essential doctrines of the faith as believers. And they're really interested in helping unbelievers, those who are still in the Watchtower or are considering coming out, to be comfortable in this place. Some come just to see what these apostates are doing because they've heard about them. Bob, do you have any kind of experience that come to your mind about those? What was your first experience, the first time you came to a Witness Now for Jesus convention? What was that like?
Yeah, that was interesting. That was 1998. I had been to a BRCI conference, Biblical Research and Commentary International, which was another group of former witnesses. I was kind of wandering spiritually. I mean, I was still mentally accepting that Christ died for my sins.
Okay.
I had stepped down 3 years earlier, a little more than 3 years. There were a lot of great Christian people that I was online with, your wife being one of them, Don, and the other Joy Westerfeld, and a number of others. But they had told us about a bunch of these crazy born-agains that were meeting up on this mountain in Pennsylvania. They said, well, it's out in the woods, there's walking trails. So if they get a little too weird, you can just take a walk. And I went there fully expecting to take a walk at some point. We got lost. Actually, we were paranoid enough that we didn't even stay on site because it was at a Christian retreat. And I still wasn't real cool about the whole church. And so we stayed at a little motel over in Orwigsburg, Pennsylvania, nearby. And we got there on Friday night. And I went basically just to see all these people I knew. Joy Vino, Joy Westerfeld, Jim and Joy, Don and Joy, and a bunch of others. And so we walk in and they're singing and people with their hands up in the air. Where we sat, there was a guy in front of us that I haven't seen him there since, but full sleeve tattoo, both arms up, praising God. And I was just like, what have I walked into?
Whoa.
And I was kind of watching, looking for, these people are kind of putting this on. And after a while, I realized that they weren't. And it was a transformational weekend for me. It really was. And it's been great ever since. And now, of course, Eric Grieshaber and Bob Anderson and I kind of took over from Joan Setnar when she stepped aside from leadership in this. Her and her husband Bill started this in 1979. Bill passed away. Joan continued till 2011, and then Eric and Bob and I took over. And then we've had Charles Smith start one in near Missouri. Charles Kelly out in Sacramento. We had one in Florida this year, another one in Texas this year. So there's really a lot going on, and it's a great thing. It's we try to be, I put on the graphic there a safe, friendly place. It's a good landing spot, I think.
And that is really important because everybody's welcoming. It's great for those of us who have not been Jehovah's Witnesses to go in and meet those who were Jehovah's Witnesses and are now believers. Yeah. It's a great place to have Jehovah's Witnesses come in who are still Jehovah's Witnesses but are questioning, because they can ask questions without being, attacked, demeaned, or anything like that, because questions are really valid and important.
Yeah.
And several, we had one there some years ago. She was a pioneer. In fact, that year, her and her kids were on display on the billboard at the Watchtower convention because she was so faithful and dedicated. And for some reason, she thought she needed to go check out these apostates, and so she went. Well, I picked her up on the way through. She asked me questions all the way there. It was almost nonstop questions, and she spent the entire retreat center there. She came to the Lord that weekend and partook of communion for the very first time in her entire life on Sunday morning at the Witnesses Not for Jesus convention. And that was a huge spiritual experience for her to do that. It was unbelievable to watch. So you do have those kinds of things happen.
Oh, yeah. It amazes me, too, that, and it actually shouldn't amaze me. It should be an expectation that God always brings just the right people there.
Right. He does, yeah.
People that seem to need it. I mean, we never know who's going to show up. We don't charge an admission registration fee. We do ask people to register online just so we have some idea of how many people are showing up. But it's always amazing to see who shows up and what happens there. And
right.
I've used the phrase a lot of times that God pulls this off in spite of our best efforts.
Exactly. So just to
more and more clear that that's the case.
Yeah, if you have a heart for Jehovah's Witnesses, go to the convention. Yeah. If you have family or friends who are Jehovah's Witnesses and you're trying to figure out what to do next, go to the convention. Yeah. If you're a Jehovah's Witness who is doubting or having questions about it, go to the conference. Yeah. If you're a Jehovah's Witness who thinks that we're completely wrong, by all means, come to the conference. We would love to talk to you there. Yeah. If you don't make it this year, or to this particular one this year, there are others. You can come next year, or you could go to one closer in your area. There is, as Bob said, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, Missouri, and California. So coming to a town near you, or at least in your state, probably, you can be there.
Yeah. If you can't go to the conference, contact us through Facebook. We have a Facebook page, or at wnfj.org. Leave us a message.
Right. And you also have a website with the YouTube videos, right?
Yes. That the YouTube channel is WNFJ 2008. 2008 is when we started keeping the videos of all the talks. So virtually all the talks from all the conferences are there.
Right. So you have, and in our description section, you have ways to contact Bob and to go to his website as well. So consider it. Ron, would you care to walk us out of here?
I would care to do that. Yes, our resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services are provided by Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is just in case. Joe's Services coverage comes from Armageddon and D Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gumma. SARD Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur, special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, to humanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Yo Leg Pulling. Technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham & Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisami. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, but you will never be able to prove that in a court of law. Never. No, not going to happen at all. So, well, Bob,
All right. So we can
good to see you again.
It's always a pleasure.
And yeah, exactly. And we'll see you in about 3 weeks or so.
Yes.
So we can all wave goodbye and say adios.
Adios.